We talk on this podcast about empowering music students, but what about empowering yourself as a music educator? Today's guest will share some great tips to help you slow down and make thoughtful choices that will benefit you and your students.
Welcome to Pass the Baton, Empowering Students in Music Education. Here, we amplify the voices of music teachers around the world who are passing the baton and creating environments where the music students are empowered. Together, we can help students transform from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. I'm Kathryn Finch.
And I'm Theresa Hoover, and we're so glad to be back with you again today. So, Kathryn, today's guest I thought was just so timely for what she was talking about. You know, Jen Rafferty. I've known Jen for several years, but to hear her really get into what we can do as music teachers to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can be the best for our students, it was wonderful.
It really was. It's such a good reminder for our own benefit, but then also for our kids' benefit too.
Oh, yeah.
That if they have us as a model of making positive choices and listening to our body, they will too. And that's what they need to be good learners, to be ready to learn.
Good learners, which translates into good musicians, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking about, art and music here. And, you know, good humans can go through that to become good musicians. So it's so vital for what we do. Yeah.
So before we get to today's interview, we want to remind you that there are show notes in your podcast player and also linked below in the YouTube video.
Yep. And if you liked today's interview, definitely consider, showing us some love. You can subscribe, you can follow, leave a rating or a review. All of those things really help other people find the podcast and, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. And we just launched a Buy Me a Coffee site for Pass the Baton. So it would be really helpful to support us in that way, and just helps us with some hosting fees and website fees and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, so
consider that.
Yep. All the links, you find them in the show notes.
Yep.
Okay, welcome back. We're so glad to be here again, and we're excited to be joined by today's guest, Jen Rafferty. Hi, Jen. So good to see you.
Hello. It's so good to see you too. Both of you again. It's always so great talking with you.
Yeah. So I think, what did we say when we were talking last? It's been almost 3 years that I've known you, 2.5, something like that.
About 2.5 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thanks to the world of the internet. And I'm glad that we were able to connect then and then keep this connection going. So before we kind of jump into today's episode, can you introduce yourself? Tell us about your background. Tell us what you're up to these days in education.
Sure. So I started off my career as a music teacher in Central New York, and I was in the classroom for about 15 years, teaching mostly middle school general music and choir, just totally my jam. Middle school general music is really my favorite. And I had the opportunity to develop some really cool programs while I was there, including a high school modern band program, a Ghanaian drumming course, and we had a blast. I loved it. And now I'm not there anymore, but the person who has taken my place is now doing amazing things with both of those programs, and kids are writing and producing and performing their own tunes. It's great. It was really cool to be able to build a program like that. And then, I wrote a book, and COVID happened right afterwards.
That thing.
A small thing. So, I published the book in December of 2019. And, I was conducting honors choirs throughout New York State at that point. I was presenting at conferences throughout the country, and I was so excited to be on the book tour. Well, along with COVID, I ended up getting a divorce and moving out of my house with my kids, who were 5 and 7 at the time, the same weekend the world shut down. And that was quite a weekend. And I share that as part of my story because it really led to a lot of reflection and introspection and figuring out, what did I want to do moving forward? Everything I thought that I was the day before, I wasn't anymore. And figuring out how to teach music online, figuring out now how to be a single parent in a new house, and, the pandemic situation, that little thing. There was a lot of transition. And so I devoted my energy to creating spaces for educators to talk about how we can be progressive with our music programs and move forward in a place that best serves kids in this time of transition. And that's how we met, which was great. And decided, I need to really focus on my own healing journey. I stayed home with my kids that next semester, what I thought would just be a semester to homeschool, started my PhD in educational psychology, and decided I don't know that I wanted to go back to teaching music anymore. So I transitioned out of the classroom and started my business, which is Empowered Educator, and that focuses on the social and emotional well-being of all of the adults in schools. And so I do that now all over the place, which is great. Thank you to the internet. And here I am talking to you. It's been a really wonderful journey and something that's been extremely important and timely.
Yeah.
I think well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that story. I think it's just so important to hear like the realness of doing this,
It was raw. There was a lot of tears and a lot of transition. And, we were talking yesterday when we were together, we were talking about identity shift too, and as music teachers, especially teachers in general, but especially music teachers, we tie so much of our identities to our jobs and our careers. And, what COVID taught me and so many other teachers I spoke with was that it ripped away a part of our identity. And it was difficult to grapple with, well, who am I if I'm not standing up in front of my choir? And that who am I question led me down the path that I'm on right now. But it is an important question to continue to ask because it can be so consuming of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about, the COVID, like it's turned our lives upside down, personally, but also, like you said, professionally, because we're not necessarily, now maybe we're kind of back into the classroom as before, but it really has made a lot of us rethink what we do, because we have the world was shaken up upside down, right? And so now it's like, we could go back to putting everything how it was, but should we, anyways, it's the one thing that we talk about a lot on our podcast here is empowering music students. But I love that today we're going to talk about empowering educators, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about your company?
Sure. So I really leverage concepts of mindset, of emotional intelligence, and of cognitive neuroscience. I am a nerd at heart. And I will say that this obsession with brains actually started at the very beginning of my career. I did really well in school. I went to Ithaca College with a music education and vocal performance degree, and I was really great. I was a great student. I had all of my professors telling me how wonderful I was, and you're a natural, Jen, and all. So I walked into my very first job feeling great. I had my content down. My pedagogy was, solid. I wrote my beautiful 3-page paper about my philosophy, and so when I got into my classroom, though, 7th grade general music, no less, I had no idea who my kids were. And I felt incredibly unprepared. And to be honest with you, I was mad. I was really mad about it because I was like, wait a second. I thought this was supposed to be the dream. I thought this was supposed to be something that was so easy because I was so good at it. Why is this so difficult? And the more that I share that story, the more common I hear that it is. And it's not something we talk about very often. We sometimes mention the struggles of first year teaching, but if we're really being honest here, ladies, there's a bait and switch kind of situation that happens. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just this. And we need to talk about that because I think that's also leading to the attrition problem because of the great shock that happens during that first year. And we're not doing enough to support our teachers in a way that really matters, especially our special teachers, especially our music teachers. And so, I say this so frankly because I almost left teaching. It was that bad. I would come home crying all the time. I was so stressed out. I would I'd come home and I would do lesson plans the rest of the night. And then I'd go to sleep on my couch and I'd wake up and do it again. That's not a way to sustain anything. And if we're being honest too here, I'm not able to serve my students very well if I'm doing that all the time.
Right.
So I didn't know all of that in that moment when I was, fresh and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of college. But I did know that if I understood my kids' brains a little bit better, I could at least be more responsive in my teaching. So I went on a quest for research about cognitive neuroscience and developmental cognition for adolescents in particular, because they're going through profound changes. And we don't really talk about middle school kids in that way, and we need to. I loved finding out about brains, and that kind of stayed throughout my entire career in the classroom, which then led me here. I'm going to land the plane for you now, Kathryn, to where I'm at right now, is because, is where I leverage these ideas of cognitive neuroscience, because the biggest tool that we have sits between our ears. And we, especially as educators, have no formal training about how it works. And if you have an idea of how to navigate your brain, understand that you are not your brain, you are a person who has a brain, everything changes for you. And so in my field of work that I'm in right now, and my perspective is, when educators understand this and become empowered in understanding their agency with their brain, they provide models for kids to do the same.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm processing and just thinking about how big that is, what you just said.
Theresa, this is the thing that gets me up in the morning and lights a fire under my butt, because I'm telling you that, yes, I work with adults, and I work with adults because the change doesn't happen when we're focusing all of our time, energy, attention on our kids. And we think it does, because that's the world that we live in. We are in the education business. The focus is the kids. That's the outcome, right? But when we pay so much attention to the outcome, we forget that there are inputs that need to be paid attention to. And without better inputs, we are not able to change the outputs. So we're seeing things like increased, increased attrition, right? We'll just start with the adults, right? Which leads to a decrease in student performance, an increase in student disciplinary referrals, an increase in student mental health concerns. And so when we focus our attention on the kids that need us, but not the adults, and we know about the attrition problem, we're not actually serving them. So when we flip the script, while I'd say that, I work with the adults in these spaces because the well-being of a school is dependent on the well-being of the adults, right. It's really about the kids. It's always about the kids. Mm-hmm. And that's how we make generational change. That's the business we're in. We make generational change. And this is how.
Yeah. So you're saying until we take care of ourselves as teachers, there's nothing we can do for the kids. We're not going to.
Yeah. And the messaging has been so backwards this whole time. It's again, especially as music teachers, right? It is all consuming. It is all consuming. And it becomes this martyrdom that leads us, no matter how good you are at your job, it leads you to burnout and overwhelm and depletion. And so two things happen then. First is the students see examples of all of the adults in their lives normalizing burnout, that this is what it means to be an adult, right? And then the second thing is that we don't have the capacity to hold space for our kids, especially when they need us the most, because we're so fried. And that is not doing a service to our kids. That is a huge disservice. So when we change the story about selflessness and realize that that is more harmful than good, the most generous thing we can do for our students is take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you sold me. So what do we do about it? So, let's think about this for real, right? So we're getting ready to start a new school year, right? Some of us listening might be, a weekend. Some of us might be starting next week. What do we actually do? How can we, all these things you're talking about, I'm in, but give me the practical.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to fire hose you with the practical, even though it might have been a little fire hosey with the information. I just get really excited because it's so important, right? The practical is actually going to be something so far from what you might expect. We need to get more in touch with our bodies. And here's why. Your mind thinks thoughts, your body feels feelings. And so much of the time we live from the neck up. We're constantly in our heads, constantly. But when you think about the times when you feel stress, you can't see your thoughts, but you can feel your feelings. And you can identify, oh, my shoulders want to be earrings right now. My stomach is in knots. I am sweating all of a sudden. I'm getting very hot. My chest is a little tight. My breathings get a little fast, right? My breathing is a little fast right now. Those are ways that your body is trying to communicate with you that something is not okay. But the problem is we are terrible listeners, right? I mean, when you have a headache or you're not, or you have a knot in your stomach or your chest is tight, what do we do? We just like zhuzh it down because we have to do this for the kids, right? We've got a job to do. We have to pick up carpool. We have to go to rehearsal, whatever it is. And then we just keep going the whole entire time, pushing it down until what happens? We know this, right? We have what happens after the musical? Everyone gets sick. I mean, it's not a surprise, and we joke about it because it's common, but it's not normal. What's happening is your body is using the language the only language that it has to communicate with you that something is not okay, that needs to be addressed now. And so the most practical thing that I can share with you and your listeners right now is slow down your pace for you to actually hear what your body's saying and then listen. Because when you're in that stress response, you cannot create. So part of that is I'm going to say this and can be a little bit triggering for some people, is breathing. is deep breathing. But truly, when you take just a moment and do 3 rounds of a box breath or 3 rounds of a 4-7-8 breath, or any kind of breathing technique, what you're doing is you're regulating your nervous system and creating safety so you can move forward and do something that you want to do instead of feeling stressed all the time.
So we're going to do this breathing, right? We're going to be listening to our bodies. We're slowing down. Mm-hmm. What is this, like the first thing when I wake up in the morning? When?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I do. I set my alarm for 4 times throughout the day. And when I was in the classroom, I would do this when I got up in the morning, before I got out of my car in the parking lot. I would do this during lunch. I would do this with a particularly ornery class. And then I would do it again before I left work. It would still be in my car in the parking lot. But now, I put in my alarms. So my alarm goes off and I do a breathing break. And here's why this is important, because even if you're feeling great, your ability to interrupt your autopilot is essential to making any sort of change. You operate 3% with your conscious mind. That's it. 3 to 5% with your conscious mind. 95 to 97% of the time we are operating under our subconscious mind, which means it's super efficient, right? That's why you can drive to work and not really think about which turns you're making, because your brain operates on habits and patterns and routines, and it's got you. But no change is going to happen unless you interrupt that pattern. So the breathing breaks serve as an interruption so then you can raise your consciousness and make a new choice. Because if you're feeling stress in that moment and you don't notice, nothing's going to change. This is about noticing.
Yeah. And what I hear you say too is it sounds like it's on the proactive too. It's like a checking in of how am I feeling, And I think sometimes I am not good at this, but sometimes like I've been starting to breathe more over this past year. And then I start to notice, like, you know what, today you're presenting and there's going to be a really long day and you're going to have all this energy after the presentations, the multiple presentations, that if you don't do something with that, you're going to be in trouble, and so I start to get to the point where I'm like, okay, so I don't want to, but I'm going to get on the bike for 20 minutes and just get it out, because I've done it too many times where I don't listen. And then I am in trouble. Then I do have a heavy chest, or I do have racing thoughts or whatever it is. And it's, I didn't listen.
Yes. And that's a beautiful example too, because it doesn't always have to be the bad kind of stress. It could just be an overwhelm of emotion, that adrenaline rush that you get from giving a presentation or the very first day of school, right? That buildup of energy, you can feel that somewhere in your body. And because feelings happen in your body, not your mind, they have to be released physically. So going for a bike ride, going for a run, getting in your car and screaming is always a good cathartic thing to do. If you're really mad and feel like you need to rage, check out a local rage room that you have in your neighborhood. I mean, I take my kids to the rage room. It is a fabulous way to get rid of that emotional energy. Yeah. Have you been to one? Do you have them by you?
I have.
Yes, you have.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I think it was like a sledgehammer, and I was just smashing like, I don't even know what, like pottery. And it was great.
Oh, it's so good. I hosted an Empowered Educator event one time at a Smash Room. I'll do it again because it was great. But we had big copy machines. It was very cathartic for all of us. But, this is part of this too, right, Kathryn? When your students see, or your kids see you processing your emotions in ways that are healthy and safe and productive, we start to change the paradigm of what's possible for them. That it's not just, that's part of my beef with some of these social emotional learning programs that are out there, is they're about kids. And that's fine. But if the messages that they're receiving in the models aren't congruent with the words that are coming out of our mouths, they're not getting the message. Like, let's be really clear about this, right? So this is why embodiment of these practices are so important. And when you start to use them regularly and the kids in your life see you use them, then all of a sudden they start to change as well.
Can I play the part of the skeptic for a minute?
Please. I love it. Yes.
Okay. So what about the teacher that has 12 classes a day, before school chorus rehearsal, after school musical rehearsal, then has to pick up the kids, and that is breathing going to do it? Is that going to solve all the problems?
No,
I know I'm being a pain.
No, you're not being a pain, because this is important. And it's important that people share their resistance to this too, because it would be weird if you just took everything I said at face value and said, okay, this is going to change the world. Got it. No, this dialogue is extremely important, because the truth is deep breathing going to change the world? No, that's ridiculous. Right? There are two things to your question that I want to address right now. The first thing is, there are very big infrastructure problems that exist within our school systems that are very real. However, we cannot solve them from a place of stress and protective mode, because we're in a survival mode. We're protected. We literally don't have access to the part of the brain that we need to solve the problems. When you're in a survival state, your brain shuts off access to your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for higher order thinking and prioritizing and organizing, right? So we can't think clearly enough to solve problems. So that's first of all. Once we're regulated and we can have an idea of what feels aligned to us, then we can start making decisions that feel good. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, for the person who is going through their day like a busy checklist, that even as you were listing all of these things, like that was my life, right? It was wake up, make sure the kids are out of bed, make the lunches. Did you take your instrument? Did I take my instruments? Get to work. And now I'm having the train come, and it's like a 7-minute train on a Tuesday morning, and so all of the stress is happening, and I'm not even at work yet. And then having those moments throughout the day where you can take that 30 seconds to do a breathing exercise. Like, don't tell me you don't have time for that, because I'm going to say to you that you have time for everything you prioritize. And if you're not prioritizing yourself, then you're going to continue to live a life that serves other people and other people's comfort level before your own. And the impact is only going to be as large as your ability to regulate yourself. You're not doing anybody any favors by being a martyr. So that's the first piece of this. And all of that is very tied to identity. And I get it. And we can go through that maybe on another podcast if you'd like. But that's the truth. And this system that we've set up to honor and revere this martyrdom and selflessness. I mean, teachers get awards for how selfless they are. That's lunatic to me. I can't even. Did I just say that's lunatic? That's lunatic. That's how crazy. Like that's like how crazy it is in my mind. I can't even think about words. That is absolutely insane to me. Because in what world is it okay to lose your sense of self? How can you possibly have impact, especially as an artist, if you don't have a sense of self? You are not doing these kids any favors. And so flipping the script is disruptive. But this is, if we really take a look at what's going on, it's not working. Yeah. This is how we make sustainable change that will then create space for that teacher who's like, I don't have time to breathe. Okay, well, let's talk about why you think you don't have time to breathe. Mm-hmm. That's the question. Where are your priorities where you put yourself last? That's interesting. You put yourself last because, and once we start asking those questions, well, then it gets really juicy.
Yeah, I think too, it's also like the power of, we always just get stuck in, I can't. I teach classes in the morning, right? And there is some freedom and it's empowering to think about like, but what can you do? What do I have control over? I do have control over my lunch. I do have control of the lighting and what I listen to. I do have control over, going to a website and doing a visual breathing exercise, right? Like, so that the thinking of like, there's got to be stuff that you can do in your workday. It might be limited to certain times of the day for sure, but there's got to be some time that you can make some positive changes.
100%. And even just using that word can't is disempowering, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're going to be honest here too. Like there's no world that you can't do this. When you replace can't with won't, now that is empowering because that puts the agency back in your hands. Can't is abdication of power. It's excuses. It's not my fault, but I won't make time for this. Well, now we're asking a really different question. Okay, that's interesting. Well, why won't I? Well, I guess I'm not prioritizing myself, or I guess I'm not finding the 5 minutes here, but perhaps I can find the 5 minutes here. It's not even 5 minutes. We're talking like 40 seconds, right? But even switching that language, because language is very powerful. And like you can't see your thoughts, you can feel your feelings, you can hear the words coming out of your mouth. And if the words you're saying are disempowering, you're never going to outperform the language you use.
Yeah. So many good things. And I think just kind of going back to what you were saying, before, this idea that the breathing's not going to solve all my problems, but at least it will put me in a place where I can start to find solutions to my problems.
Exactly. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's everything.
It's that easy.
It is. It's really that easy. And like breathing doesn't even cost anything. I mean, we don't think twice when someone's like, oh, I have this gym membership, right? And I'm working out, but all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, breathing breaks? What is this? What is this? What we're doing is you're training yourself, you're training your psyche, you're training your ability to rewire your programming in your brain, you're training your emotional awareness and your physical awareness. I mean, this is brain gym is really what it is, which I know is trademarked from like another company, but what I'm saying is, for this analogy, is important work that we get to do for us because we got into teaching to make impact in this world. And I'll say it again, the extent of your impact is going to be a reflection of the work that you do in this arena.
So something I was thinking of when you were talking, it was this idea that a lot of people say, well, I want to learn how to work smarter. What is the word? I'm losing the saying right
smarter,
now.
Not harder.
Not harder, yeah. Right? And I guess I'm thinking, I'm hearing what you're saying is that if you slow yourself down, if you take care of yourself, then you can do just that, right? Because I feel like there are times that I have this list of things and I'm just at school going through them all, blasting through them and not really thinking through the whole thing. Do I really need to make this thing and laminate it? And then, or right, like you're not thinking it through. But if I slowed down and maybe took some time to think through it, then I might decide, you know what, we're going to laminate or we're going to Xerox this and whatever. Right. But sometimes I think you can, if you spend the time thinking and slowing down, you might be working smarter and not harder.
Yeah. And then I totally 100%. And I'm going to even add to that too, is that less thinking, more feeling. Because when you get into your body about what feels good right now, even something as simple as, do I want to laminate this thing? Right. I mean, because when you start to feel and you're like, and you mean, feeling it means something about, alignment, right? Is this aligned to who I am? Or is this a should or expectation of somebody else? And slowing down and really feeling that, because your body will tell you if it's not aligned. So if you're holding this thing, you're like, do I need to laminate this thing? And you are slow enough for you to actually listen. Your intuition will tell you, actually, the thing is, the teacher next door laminates all of her stuff, and I'm feeling some sort of pressure to do this also. I don't really want to laminate this thing. And that has nothing to do with you thinking it through. It's just taking a moment and feeling it. Does this feel good to me right now? Or is this somebody else's should? And as soon as those should start floating through your head, all of that is judgment. All of it. And, I say this phrase a lot in the work that I do, we don't should on ourselves. we don't do that. And we don't should on other people either. And as soon as you hear that word should, it's a really great moment of awareness of, is this aligned or not? And it does become that simple. Easy. No. Simple. Yes.
And then I think what I also hear is that if we're modeling this, if we're acting in a healthy way, that's gotta be a great model for our kids, that our kids then can soak in those tools and soak in those ways and be better for learning, being ready to learn, because they're also taking care of themselves. They're also able to say, I think I need a break, or I think I need this, or you know what, I went back to the calm corner and did the breathing exercise, and then I was able to return,
Yes, that's it. I want to live in a world where, Kathryn, you're like, hey, Jen, I'm going to be 2 minutes late to our department meeting because I need to regulate my nervous system. And I'm like, cool. See you soon. Right. I mean, that's the world that we're in, because when you do that, then the kids are also then learning by example, because they're watching us. Our kids are learning how to be people by watching us. So it doesn't matter what you say to them about how to navigate a conflict between you and your friend. If you have a really unhealthy way of communicating with your coworker and they are watching you do that, right? Where's the congruence? There isn't any. And so when you take the mirror and focus it on yourself, that's going to be the biggest bang for our buck when we're talking about the education space.
And I imagine you would be a proponent for all of these breathing exercises with the kids. I remember pre-pandemic, I had a 6th grade band class right after recess. So we would start each class period with, we called it 3 calming breaths, because it was like, I knew that was going to help me prepare for the class, but it was also going to get them into a headspace. And at first they kind of laughed at me, and but we did it. And I feel like it was beneficial. Have you seen similar?
Oh yeah, I would do that too with my classes too. I mean, I would have, 80 7th and 8th graders in my choir, right? Boys and girls. Okay. And, when I felt like I needed to do this, I'd be like, oh, Ms. Rafferty needs a breathing break right now. Let's go. And of course, being middle school, this is stupid, and they would laugh and be silly. But after a few times that we would do this, so either I noticed I needed it or I noticed they did, we would do it. So what started to happen was they would ask for it. And then, they would come up to me like, oh, hey, Ms. Rafferty, that breathing thing that you taught us the other day? Well, I did it before my test and I felt really calm before I took my test. Yeah. That's it. That's the whole thing. Yeah. And here's the difference too, Theresa. It's not like there is an administrative initiative saying, we're doing this now. This is part of our culture here. Because then what happens is, there are some places that are mandating this right now, which makes my job so much more difficult when I come into these places. Because what happens is that when you as the adult don't understand the inherent value for yourself, there is a mismatch of what is going to be communicated to the kids, and they're not going to value it either. So yes, 100% do it for your kids and with your kids, only if you embody this work yourself, which is another reason why, I get so jazzed about all of this work that I'm telling you about, because I practice everything that I teach. If you look at the trajectory, I went from that weekend of being a single mom, in COVID, all of a sudden in isolation, without knowing what my job and my future was going to be like. Fast forward 18 months, I was on the TEDx stage. And the reason why that happened was because of everything I'm sharing. I do this. And when you come from a place of empowerment, that's how you co-create your world, that you are no longer a victim of your circumstances, that you are able to stand in your power and decide, who do I want to be in this moment? And when you're really clear about who you want to be, everything is available to you.
So we usually at this point ask people, what can you recommend our listeners do tomorrow? And I'm pretty sure you've already told us that. In fact, I'm guessing you'd say start today.
start right now. If you're listening with us right now, right after this is over, just take a moment, put your hand to your heart, put your other hand on your belly so you get a little grounded. And if you want to do this by yourself, great. If you want to do this with your kids, great. If you want to do this with your partner or your friends, amazing. Close your eyes and just do 3 rounds of a box breath. And that's just inhale for 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. And what's going to happen is you may feel a couple things, like more relaxed. You might feel more sleepy, probably because you need more sleep. But what's actually going on is that you are regulating your nervous system from a survival state to a safety state. You are moving from protection to performance, and you are getting your prefrontal cortex back online, and you are raising your conscious awareness for you to make a new decision that will serve you instead of continuing on whatever the default was throughout the day. So that is going to be extremely helpful. And let us know if you're practicing this right after you listen to this podcast. Shoot one of us an email about how this worked for you, because it makes big changes. It really, really does.
Okay. Well, thank you for the reminder. I needed it too.
Me too, girl. This is it. This is my, before I signed on, breathing. But after I sign off, I'm shaking it out. I'm going for my walk, because my body needs to regulate. And that is always my number one priority.
Well, something we've been asking everybody is the word empowerment. What does that mean? So again, I think I have a pretty good understanding, but maybe could you be explicit in what do you mean when you use the word empowerment?
I love this question. And I also ask everyone who comes into my world, what does this mean to you? Yeah. And for me, it really means recognizing your agency in every single. You always have choices, and understanding that you have those choices is a game changer, because you are no longer falling victim to your circumstances. No one can make you feel anything. You get to decide how you want to show up and be. And that power, it can be scary sometimes, because we weren't taught or told or modeled how to do this. So not only is it learning something new for ourselves, but shifting a paradigm where not only are we empowered, but we are empowering other people to feel empowered too. But we don't do that by telling, we do this by embodying. And that's really the secret sauce.
Yeah. It is a neat word. And I love that you use that word. I've been incorporating that in my research a lot right now, because as you know, I'm also doing the PhD thing, but just thinking about what that word means and what it means to different people is always just really fascinating. And the fact that we can think of ourselves as teachers as empowered, and we can hopefully create these environments where our students are empowered. It's pretty neat.
It's amazing. It's the best work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best.
It really is. Mm-hmm. is there anything that we didn't ask you about that we should have? Did we miss anything? I always worry about that.
Well, I will leave you with this one thing that I think is important, especially as busy music teachers. It's very easy to feel as if you're not doing enough. And this is something that I actually have, it's on my desk. I look at it every single day. Enough is a decision, not an amount. And you're the only person that gets to decide when it's enough, period. And that is something that I have kept near and dear to my heart. I still get like heart flutters whenever I say this out loud, because we are so ingrained to be thinking that we're just not doing enough. We can't measure up. There's always more. And that consistently leads you to a place of scarcity, of lack. And we can't create beautiful things when we're in scarcity and lack. So that is something that is really important moving through any of this work.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I don't know if you could tell I'm like taking notes as you're talking, even though we're recording.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Yep. It's great.
Good.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Jen. So if people want to connect with you and learn more about all the wonderful things you're doing, how can they do that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would love to do is actually gift your listeners with something. Something that's going to be so fun. So if you go to empowerededucator.com/meditations, I've created a guided beginner meditation series. So it's totally free. It's a gift for you. And I made it for people who were like me, who were so busy nonstop that I don't have time to meditate. I don't know how to stop my thoughts, which by the way is not a thing. And I don't know if I'm doing it right. I must not be very good at this. And so I wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't allow myself to slow down enough to even do any of the things that we were talking about today. So I made this for old me and for all the people who resonate with that kind of thinking, because you can do it. And that meditation practice is really important to training your brain to slow down and giving yourself permission to do some of these breathing breaks. So that's on there, empowerededucator.com/meditations. And you get it in a private podcast feed. So you can listen to it on your favorite podcast platform, which is really cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then any other way is, through my website, which is empowerededucator.com. I am on Instagram at Jen Rafferty _. And of course, my podcast, which is Take Notes with Jen Rafferty, that both of you have been a guest on separately, actually.
Yeah.
So that's there as well.
Okay, great. We'll make sure we put links to all of that stuff in the show notes. So
amazing.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We really, really, really appreciated this. And I know that our listeners will too. It's such good stuff to have in mind at the beginning of the year, but really anytime during the school year. So
yeah.
That's a good reminder.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to connect with both of you again and on this really awesome platform.
If you liked today's episode, you will love the PassTheBatonBook.com website, where you can find free resources, coaching services, and how to support Pass the Baton. Speaking of support, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again for listening.